State Senator Lydia Edwards is our guest. Let's go on the record. She's looking for light at the end of the Sumner Tunnel. With East Boston in her district, transportation's a key issue. And that's before we get to the migrant crisis, tax relief, and gun reform. Time to go on the record.
From WCVB Channel 5, the inside word from Washington to Beacon Hill. Today's newsmakers are going on the record.
And welcome to OTR, everybody. I'm Ben Simoneau, along with Newsletter 5's political reporter Sharman Sacchetti. Ed Harding's off on this holiday weekend, and with us here at the table is State Senator Lydia Edwards. She represents the 3rd Suffolk District, first taking office in January 2022. She's a Democrat and a former member of the Boston City Council. She holds graduate degrees from American University and Boston University. Senator Edwards, thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, thanks for being here. So we want to start with the migrant housing crisis in Massachusetts. Frustration certainly building between the State House and also the White House. Here is what the Speaker of the House, Ron Mariano, said last week.
We need to put a framework around this from the feds. We need someone to take charge of this and say, this is what you can expect. The guy's running for president. He better start paying attention to this.
Those are some pretty plain-spoken words from the Speaker. Now, nearly 7,000 families are in the shelter system. More than 3,000 are in hotels and motels. Do you think the federal government needs to do more?
Yes, and I think we have a perfect example of when the federal government does do more. During COVID, for example, when they provided the money, when they provided the regulations, when they provided those things, we're good. Massachusetts as a state, we rose to the occasion then. We will rise again now. We are trying to meet this moment, but we need a vital partner in this. And whether it's finances or if it's work permits, the federal government is the entity to do that.
Massachusetts has declared a state of emergency. So what's your message to President Biden?
Help. More importantly, we can't do this without you. Again, we are not asking you to do more than you have already done and shown that with those resources that Massachusetts can meet the moment. So give us the resources and we'll take care of it from here.
What's taking so long? You're a Democrat. The president's a Democrat. There's an election year next year. And I mean, a big article on Friday in the New York Times about the problems in Chicago. Chicago has been overrun. Winter is fast approaching. It's an issue in New York. It's an issue here. Where's the White House and why are they dragging their feet?
I have the same issue and concerns. I don't know why. I know that when they responded well, again, during COVID, wasn't that long ago. We're not talking history from decades ago. We're talking 3 years ago. The White House knew to rise and continue to rise to that moment. This is a nationwide concern. It's a federal concern. So I don't know what is taking so long, but I do know when they do give us the resources, Massachusetts will be able to handle it.
Are you worried about the political impacts next year of this? I mean, this problem is very much not under control.
I'm not worried about the political impacts. I'm worried about the people's impacts right now. I think people are being unnecessarily divided. They're turning on each other. I see a lot of cruelty coming from people towards migrants who, they're just trying to survive here. And I believe that it's, in some cases, drawing the worst out of us. At the same time, I'm very proud of the people in towns throughout Massachusetts who have risen to the occasion, who have done what they can to provide resources. So again, I'm asking on the federal government to please meet this moment and this generous spirit of Massachusetts and allow us and give us the resources to do what we need to do.
How much longer can this go on? We're hearing about nearly 1,000 people coming a month, maybe it's 500. The numbers certainly fluctuate, but we are hearing about just massive waves of people coming and hotel rooms that are, cities and towns.
Filling up.
It's filling up.
Listen, it can't go on much longer because we don't have the resources or the housing or the places to put individuals. But what could be helpful, again, is if we had the work permits to allow these individuals to get to work, to help our economy, and which many cases that's what they came here to do, is to work. So if we can just do that, again, it can go. We can adjust, we can move, and we can meet this moment.
Let's talk about gun violence. You worked on that topic as a Boston City Councilor. Last week, there was a tragedy, as you know, in Holyoke. A pregnant woman was struck by a bullet while riding a city bus. Her unborn baby, was killed. The House is moving ahead with gun reform legislation. Assault weapons and ghost guns are the focus there largely, as well as keeping guns away from schools and polling places. Will the Senate support it? There's been a bit of a standoff between the two chambers so far on this topic this year.
You call it standoff. I say it's part of the process in which we are going to also have a continued conversation. We don't take this lightly in the State House. This is a big deal. Many people feel that this is a constitutional right and they have access to certain guns, and many people are concerned about safety. So when you have those two conflicting sometimes interests of rights versus safety, we have to have a real conversation about it. What I expect is that the Senate is either going to look at the House and have a hearing, or we're going to come up with our own package to look at how we're going to deal with this moment and discuss gun safety issues and reform.
Will it get done before the end of the year?
I cannot commit to that, but I can assure you that we will be having those conversations and already are having those conversations.
I do want to mention, because I did work on the story last week, and the House says that they plan to hold a hearing this week on their gun bill, and they expect to vote this month, and they expect to pass before the holidays. You know, the Senate president has said she remains committed to getting something done into the governor's desk this session. So that would mean at least before July.
Right.
And do you have confidence, seeing how things have gone in the past, that the two sides can come together and actually work something out?
I have absolute confidence, especially in
this comes on the heels of tax relief, which took 20 months, by the way.
But you know, when we committed to it, we get it done. And so if Senate President Spilka has said it's going to get done, it'll get done.
All right, let's talk about transportation. Your district includes East Boston. It took the brunt of course, the 2-month Sumner Tunnel closure. I would like to ask your take on how it was handled.
Right
I know.
now.
What grade do you give the Healey administration? Because we all know, unfortunately, it's going to happen again next summer. How did they do?
Listen, the Healey administration inherited this as a necessary project that has had 90 years of delay. And from what I understand, in meeting with the new Secretary of Transportation, Monica Tibbetts-Nutt, we're on time. We're on time to get what we need to get done by the end of next year. So I will give them an A-.
A minus?
A-.
I mean, you can't get an A+ for something that causes so much disruption, right? I mean,
well, it's not so much that. It's more like we need to continue to have this communication. There are some mitigation components that we do need to renegotiate, and we're going to be talking to them about how we can make sure.
What are some of the ones you'd like to renegotiate?
Well, renegotiate, I'd love to talk about more frequency of ferry traffic and making sure that we continue those possibly year round. We need to talk about honestly how we subsidize those. Some of us from Winthrop and Lynn are paying the full $8 after the Sumner Tunnel is closed. So there's those certain packages, and so I want to make sure that we're again talking about how we're moving forward as fast as possible.
Let's talk about the T quickly if we can, because you also represent Revere and Cambridge, and of course Eastie is served by the Blue Line. But how confident are you in Phil Ng's ability to fix what is this, unfortunately, very broken system? I mean, we just saw the brand new Green Line extension already has speed limits on it because of track deficiencies.
Listen, I think if anything, he has demonstrated he is mostly focused on the safety. And while many people want to move as fast as possible, I'd rather we fix the problems, drill out the cavities, and that's going to take time. I have confidence in him and being able to do that. And I am seeing, and I saw when they closed the Sumner Tunnel, when we had all that we could focus on the Blue Line, it was free, it was open, we had buses that were free and open, and we moved efficiently.
What questions do you have for the general manager on, for instance, the Blue Line, which runs right through your area?
Well, I mean, I have not just questions, but also I want to give a shout out. We're moving on that Red Blue Line connector.
I was just going to ask you, is it
We're moving
time
on
for that?
It is happening. And so we're going to have actually public meetings in Beacon Hill and East Boston to talk about the impact and what the construction would look like and timelines. That's exciting for us. So I see us meeting again that moment, and that would change traffic for the entire region, if not the state, if those two are finally talking to each other.
The only two lines that don't connect, right?
That don't connect.
So it'll go to Charles MGH is still the plan.
That's the understanding, yep.